The curtain rises on a nation torn asunder, its wounds still fresh from the bloodiest conflict in American history. The year is 1865, and the Civil War has finally drawn to a close. But could the end of battle herald the beginning of true peace? Or would the echoes of gunfire give way to a single shot that would shatter the fragile hope of a reunited America? In the aftermath of war, a weary nation looked to its leader for guidance. Abraham Lincoln, the rail-splitter turned president, stood as a beacon of reconciliation. His vision for Reconstruction was not one of vengeance, but of healing. With malice toward none, with charity for all, he had proclaimed. But would his words be enough to mend the deep divisions that threatened to keep North and South forever apart? As Lincoln extended an olive branch to the defeated Confederacy, not all were pleased with his gentle approach. The radical Republicans in Congress bristled at what they saw as leniency towards traitors. They demanded harsh punishment for the South, while Lincoln sought to bring wayward states back into the fold with his 10% plan. Could these two visions of America's future coexist, or was a new conflict brewing in the halls of power? Into this cauldron of tension stepped a man whose name would soon be etched in infamy. John Wilkes Booth, a celebrated actor with a heart full of Southern sympathy, watched Lincoln's actions with growing rage. To Booth, the president was not a savior, but a tyrant who had betrayed the very essence of the Constitution. As Lincoln dared to speak of granting voting rights to black Americans, Booth's hatred reached a fever pitch. What dark thoughts festered in the mind of this Southern zealot? The fateful night of April 14th, 1865, dawned with no hint of the tragedy to come. As the sun set on Washington, D.C., the Lincolns prepared for an evening at Ford's Theater. The play was Our American Cousin, a comedy that promised a few hours of laughter and respite from the weight of rebuilding a nation. But as the audience settled into their seats, could they have known that they were about to witness the final act of a presidency? Booth moved through the theater with the confidence of a man on his home stage. He knew every nook, every shadow of this place. As laughter erupted from the crowd, masking the sound of his footsteps, Booth crept closer to his target. In that moment of mirth, could anyone have heard the whisper of destiny approaching? A single shot rang out, cutting through the jovial atmosphere like a knife. In an instant, the world changed. Abraham Lincoln, the great emancipator, slumped forward in his chair, struck down by a bullet fired at point-blank range. As Booth leaped to the stage below, his cry of Sic Semper Tyrannis echoed through the stunned theater. The assassin had made his grand exit, but the tragedy was far from over. As news of the shooting spread, a nation held its breath. Lincoln, unconscious but clinging to life, was carried across the street to the Peterson House. Surrounded by grief-stricken friends and officials, the president's life ebbed away. Could the dreams of a united America survive without its greatest champion? While Lincoln fought for his life, Booth fled into the night. The largest manhunt in American history began, as Union soldiers and citizens alike scoured the countryside for the assassin. For 12 long days, Booth eluded capture, slipping across the Potomac into Virginia. But could he outrun the long arm of justice forever? In the early hours of April 15, 1865, the unthinkable became reality. Abraham Lincoln, 16th President of the United States, drew his last breath. As the news spread, bells tolled across the nation, their mournful peals giving voice to a country's anguish. Streets filled with weeping citizens, rich and poor alike, united in their grief. How could a single bullet have silenced the voice that had guided America through its darkest hour? Lincoln's body began its final journey, a solemn procession by rail through cities and towns across the nation. At each stop, throngs of mourners gathered to pay their respects to the fallen leader. As the funeral train wound its way across the countryside, could the sight of so many Americans united in sorrow offer a glimmer of hope for the future? Meanwhile, the hunt for Booth and his conspirators intensified. On April 26th, cornered in a Virginia barn, the assassin made his last stand. Refusing to surrender, Booth met his end at the hands of Union soldiers. But would his death bring closure to a grieving nation, or only deepen the wounds of division? In the wake of the assassination, 8 individuals stood trial for their alleged roles in the plot. The proceedings were a spectacle of justice and vengeance, with 4 defendants sentenced to death. Among them was Mary Surratt, whose execution as the first woman put to death by the federal government would spark controversy for generations to come. As the conspirators met their fates, could America find a way to balance justice with mercy? With Lincoln gone, the task of reuniting the nation fell to his vice president, Andrew Johnson. But Johnson lacked Lincoln's political acumen and vision for reconciliation. As he clashed with Congress over Reconstruction policies, the dream of a peaceful reunification began to fade. Had Booth's bullet not only killed a president, but also the hope for a truly united States? In the years that followed, Lincoln's legacy grew to mythic proportions. His words, particularly the Gettysburg Address, became sacred texts of American democracy. Monuments rose in his honor, and his name graced everything from schools to cities. But as America grappled with the challenges of Reconstruction and beyond, could it live up to the ideals for which Lincoln had given his life? Even today, the events of that April night in 1865 continue to captivate the American imagination. Conspiracy theories abound, with some claiming Booth had help from Confederate officials or foreign powers. Others insist the assassin escaped and lived out his days under an assumed identity. These tales, though unproven, speak to the enduring power of Lincoln's story and the unresolved tensions of his era. As we look back on that fateful night at Ford's Theater, we are reminded of the fragility of peace and the power of a single act to change the course of history. Abraham Lincoln's assassination was more than the death of a president. It was a moment that shook the very foundations of a nation struggling to rebuild itself. In the end, we are left to wonder, could a single bullet truly kill a nation's dream? Or does Lincoln's vision of a more perfect union live on, challenging each generation of Americans to strive for that elusive goal of true equality and reconciliation?